And there's this scene where they're dancing in a practice dance space, and they keep stepping on each other's toes, right? And they're kind of getting frustrated with each other. And I just think this is such a beautiful analogy to what it just means to be in relationship. We're going to step on each other's toes, especially as we're learning a new way of dancing together. So we may have been doing the foxtrot for years and years and years, but now our life circumstances require that we're doing the waltz. Right. And so and whether that's because, a parent is coming out of addiction or is in recovery, or simply that, you were 7 years old and now you're 16 years old. And that's going to be a very different dance. And so, of course, we're going to step on each other's toes. I'm going to now overcorrect and I'm going to call you too many times. And you're going to say, actually, can you back it off?
Right.
And we're going to learn this new dance together, so that we can be in this new kind of relationship. And I think that's a lot of what the repair is about.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and we're here today again with our usual host, Dr. Greg Miller. Greg, great to see you.
It's good to be here.
And we begged, pleaded, and paid extra money to have Alexis Greeves stay on and do a second podcast with us.
Glad to continue to be here.
Alexis, you have to be wondering about that money part and where it is.
I know. You keep teasing
it's
and
in
taunting.
your Venmo.
It's very slow in coming, but we'll work on it.
It'll be there.
Yeah. Well, the last podcast went so seamlessly and really got into some very interesting conversations that we decided that we would keep Alexis to stay on and talk today about what did you say the word was?
How to repair.
How to repair. So today we're going to talk about repairs.
Yep.
Great.
For those of you that maybe didn't listen to the last one, or maybe you did, and just to review, the idea was we became aware that as people begin to engage recovery, and we encourage them to look at their own stories and how they experienced their parents, a very natural point of question and reflection is, how am I parenting? And how is my behavior and my actions showing up for my children? And for many people, that can be a very desperate place. We talked last time about this question of, have I messed my kids up, as if it's a declaration. And one of the things that we talk about here at Faithful and True is we do not believe in good families or bad families. We simply believe there are families, and there are things that the family does well, and there may be some things that the family doesn't do as well that could be hurtful or be painful for the family members. And so with that in mind, we want to continue to talk about, okay, so I'm awakening to the reality that I don't always like the way I show up for my children. Maybe I'm not as available as I would like to be. Maybe I bring more fear or shame or anger than I would like. And so I can look back and see I have made choices that have hurt my children, or maybe it's not just a one-time thing. Maybe for a lot of my life, I was a workaholic. I gave too much of my energy and time to work. And so therefore, there was a sense of abandonment for my family. So we're talking just about this recognition that there has been hurt and injury, and we also believe that there can be repair. Yeah. Do you have some sort of definition or understanding of how you talk to clients about repair?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I just want to share a story that was coming to mind as we were introducing this topic. And that is, I was just remembering a conversation I had with my own children this past week. We were driving to church, and I asked my kids, I've got two girls, 13 and 15. I said, when you hang out with your friends and their families, are there things that you recognize about our family culture that might be different, whether that's good or bad? And my older daughter said, one thing I've started to recognize is my friends' moms call them a lot during the day. And honestly, my first reaction was, yeah, well, good thing I don't do that, right? Mm-hmm. Like I give you a lot of space. I've always had my kids on a long leash. And she said, and I don't know why you don't care like their moms care.
Wow.
And so it's a little bit of a reverse around the, of the, am I messing my kids up? I was kind of in a place of, hey, I'm doing this pretty well, right? Like, look what a great parent I am. Yeah. And to hear, so I think one thing I was just thinking about was this idea of why it's so important to be attuned to our individual children and to get curious, right? To get really curious. And so to hear her reflection to me of, I'm interpreting this, I'm experiencing this as you not really caring, you're not really being interested. And so I've had to do some repair this past week around that, and to go to her and say, I didn't recognize this. And now I am realizing that I have been thinking about this as far as letting you learn what it means to be a teenager with a lot of space. And in fact, what I'm hearing now is, you need me to come closer, not move further away.
Right. And it gets to that thing that we talk about when we teach the iceberg here, Virginia Satir's iceberg, that in there's a level of meanings, messages, and core beliefs. And so you can have two children experiencing the very same thing, but they're making very different meanings out of it. And what's great, Alexis, is because you were willing to ask the question and have that conversation, your daughter may at some point have come to you, but it was probably much more efficient for you simply to ask the question, and then she had the capacity and the courage. And she also felt like y'all's relationship was a safe enough place that she could be honest.
Yes.
One of the things I hear in that is that she did not feel like she had to take care of you or edit her answer to protect your feelings. Yeah. So even that is part of a culture of the family. Yeah. My mom might have asked me a question, but I absolutely would have edited my answer, and the filter would have been, will this hurt her feelings? Will this be too much for her? And so I was in that taking care of my mom role. And so even as families are trying to figure out how to do this, you're going to discover new things about the meanings and messages that people have made about things, how some child is affected by something and another one isn't. And then also our own preconceived notions, this idea that, I'm doing this as a good parent, when in reality, our children aren't experiencing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So to go back to your question of what does it take for us to repair well, one of the things I thought about when it came to that moment, we were on our way to church, and to be open about that situation, I felt a little bruised. I had a little like mama ego bruising.
Right.
And one of the first things I did was in my church, we have there's praise and worship, and then there's a time where the kids are dismissed to go to their programming. And there's this 5 minutes of the congregation greeting one another, and I just approached a friend and I said, I just want you to know, I have some bruising in my heart today. And so I think like even acknowledging to another, right, of I think I've done some things that need repair, right, to not isolate ourselves in the recognition of repair, to keep reaching out and talking to our community, so that they can hold us. They can hold us gently and they can hold us accountable.
Right. Well, one of the things that we often talk about is kind of an innate parent shame. Yeah. And that, I'm not a mother, but my sense is that there is a mother shame and guilt that is fairly intense. And I know that as a dad, I can get triggered into my shame of, I'm a horrible dad and I messed my kids up, kind of these big, grandiose statements. And one of the ways that we can know our shame is triggered is we go into isolation. Yeah. So even if in that moment there was some mother shame that was triggered, you pushed against that and went to community and spoke that. Even in a 5-minute, greeting, you couldn't get into a big conversation, but you shared it in such a way that then there could be a follow-up conversation. Yeah. And so in those moments when maybe our children respond to us in a way, we don't send the energy back to them, because more than likely that's going to come out of our fear or our shame or our defensiveness, but we're able to offload some of that energy into our community. Yeah. And, one of the things about repair is I think one of the barriers to repair is defensiveness. Yes. Instead of being able to hear our children and really understand what is going on for them, we start defending ourselves. Well, I thought I was giving you space. I didn't want to smother you, but instead of go, okay, I can just be with you. I understand my motives were different, but I can just be with you and hear what it is that you're saying. And I don't have to defend myself right now.
Yeah. And another maybe offshoot of that is self-justification too, right?
Right.
That when we know we've hurt our child or we imagine that we did, it can be a human reaction, although I would say not one that is holy, is to say, well, I mean, of course I did that. It's a little bit of defensiveness,
Right.
but to justify it to ourselves
Right.
so that I don't have to take further steps in doing repair.
Right. Well, one of the things about justification, it's this sense of entitlement.
Yes.
That I deserve to do this.
Yes.
And it can have that additional energy with it. And I believe that justification, many times, if there is entitlement, there is a core belief that is giving that person permission. So a core belief could be, parents can't do wrong, or parents are always right, or, children have to always listen to their parents. And those types of core beliefs become a barrier that then the parent is justified in whatever reaction that they have, which actually we know is very hurtful to the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And can go in some very dangerous directions.
One of the things I would say about this repair is it's an obvious thing, but we got to get clear about what is it I'm repairing.
Yeah.
I said in the last podcast, the more specific we can be, and it sounds like, in your example, one of the best things that we can do is engage our children to help us understand how we have hurt them. And so, that vague statement of, I'm a bad parent, that's really not going to serve anyone. But if we can get clearer about the specifics of how I've hurt, in what way, what did my action cost you?
Yeah.
And like you said, have that conversation with them rather than just assume that we fully understand it.
Yeah. And as I was saying in the last podcast, the importance of creating space for the other, whether it's our spouse, we're doing a repair with our spouse, to say, and I want to hear from you. With our children, to also be able to allow them to have a voice in this repair process. I think another piece that I think is important in doing repair is that we don't see it as a one moment in time action, right? And that I can say to my child, and you're welcome to come back and talk to me about this another time, right?
And in some cases, be the one to say, and I'm going to come back and talk to you about this.
Yes.
That many times we do, and it's out of the goodness of our heart, we're offering this open invitation. You can come and talk to me about this anytime. But the reality is we may be asking our children to do more than they can do.
Right.
And that's why we bring it back and say, I want to follow up on that conversation. How are you doing with this? How did that land in you?
Yeah.
And in the last podcast, we talked about part of ownership is creating a plan to change and implementing that plan. And so if it's phone calling, am I doing a better job of calling you? Do you feel connected in that way? Is there anything you would like for me to do differently? And what may be true is, the daughter may say, yeah, way too many phone calls. I think I like our old system. Or to say, yeah, it feels great. I love that you're checking in. Or maybe we don't need phone calls. Maybe just text me.
I was going to say back off to a text.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, thinking of you. How's your afternoon?
But that's going to come from a conversation and our openness.
Yes. Yeah. And I think this is so much of what relationship building is about is, okay, so last podcast, I used some pop culture references. I've got one more. I'm thinking about a movie, Dirty Dancing.
Okay.
Where, have you guys seen this movie? The Patrick Swayze character is teaching Jennifer Grey's character how to dance, right? She's just an 18-year-old who's been going with her family to this resort in the Catskills, but she wants to be his dance partner. And there's this scene where they're dancing in a practice dance space, and they keep stepping on each other's toes, right? And they're kind of getting frustrated with each other. And I just think this is such a beautiful analogy to what it just means to be in relationship. We're going to step on each other's toes, especially as we're learning a new way of dancing together. So we may have been doing the foxtrot for years and years and years, but now our life circumstances require that we're doing the waltz, right? And so, and whether that's because, you know, a parent is coming out of addiction or is in recovery, or simply that, you know, you were 7 years old and now you're 16 years old. And that's going to be a very different dance. And so, of course, we're going to step on each other's toes. I'm going to now overcorrect and I'm going to call you too many times. And you're going to say, actually, can you back it off?
Right.
And we're going to learn this new dance together so that we can be in this new kind of relationship. And I think that's a lot of what the repair is about,
Yeah.
is learning the new dance steps together.
And a lot of times around here, we do talk about the couples dance. And I also think it's very helpful to talk about the parent-child dance, like you are, is that we have these individual dances, a dance that we do with one child versus the dance we do with the other child, because they are unique. They are bringing themselves. And what's fascinating is in the co-parenting thing, the relationship that Beth has with our sons is different than the relationship that I have. The relationship that I have with my older child is different than the younger child. And so it really is understanding the uniqueness of each dance, and instead of becoming frustrated by that, to really celebrate, we uniquely get to relate because we are two different people.
Yeah.
I think also in this getting clear about how the injury has occurred, is to also, to the best of our ability, like you've said, understand the implication. You know, in the last podcast, you talked about, you know, in the ownership piece, it's asking the other person, how were you impacted by this? And also giving them space to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, I keep referring to workaholism because that's also a part of my history and addiction. And there were seasons when my boys were young that I was over-focused on my work, giving way too much, gone way too much. And then at the end of the day when I was there, did not have enough energy for them because I had given too much at the office. So if I were to ask my boys, how do you suppose you were impacted by all of that, those years of workaholism, it's kind of unrealistic for them in that moment to be able to answer that.
Yeah.
And I need to be able to create a safe space, to be grounded in my truth, so that they can spend time to think about it, and they can even come back later with more information.
Yeah.
You know, and hopefully we can create enough of a safe environment that when they think of something else, remember when you missed that thing or you had to leave early from that thing, or, you know, I'm aware that you would come home at night and you would just exit to another room and not participate in what we were doing. That's going to be hard to hear. And I need to hear it as a wise man, not in some sort of shame, so that I can really be present with my boys as they're talking about these things that were hurtful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also thinking, and I want to bring up this story because I'm sure it impacts a lot of families out there, which is a conversation we've been having about technology. And my kids said, you know, we've noticed that you come home and everybody kind of turns on their TV show on their devices. And I had to recognize, I said, yeah, you're right. Like, I am so exhausted. I'm so emotionally exhausted from a day of providing therapy that I will collapse into my phone. And of course, I am very concerned about not only my kids' use of technology, but this whole generation growing up with, you know, with phones. What's an anxious generation. He talks about having a phone-based childhood as opposed to a play-based childhood. And so to hear from my own children, you're not showing up. Like, you're in the room, but you are not present. And I really had to stop and take a hard look at myself and say, but man, it is really nice to disconnect from the day by collapsing into my phone and having a false sense of presence.
Yeah,
right?
because we're all gathered
We're
around.
all
We're
in the room. We're all in the room, but I am not present to them or their experience other than just the occasional smile. And so that is another form of repair that I'm having to do is dig deep and say, who wants to play Clue?
Right. Yeah. Well, and even to be able to say, okay, the goal isn't everybody throws out their phone, but it's that, you know what? Everybody gets 30 minutes to detach and just relax and get in there. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, we're all going to get back together and whatever.
Right.
And even if it's instead of 4 separate devices, 4 separate TV shows, it's at least one TV show, and we're all doing it together and having conversations about what it is that we're seeing. It's constantly asking, given our current circumstances and resources, what can connection look like here? And, being the ones that invite that and encourage that, and allowing the kids to talk about their limits, because they have stressful days. They may want to be on their phone. But I do think it's important that when our child brings something to us, we hear it.
Yes.
We have all ages of men from 18 years old to 70, 75, 80-year-old men come to our workshop. And one of the things that I'm hearing more and more from the younger men is very much what you're talking about, where they were aware of how much time their parents spent on technology. Maybe it was dad working late in his office, or mom who had to follow up with stuff, or how each of them were on social media. And our children are seeing these things, and the key is, are we creating a safe enough environment where they feel like they can speak it to us? And I often say, I've heard from men that, growing up in their home, if they were to in any way challenge a parent, it was seen as disrespectful. Mm-hmm. But it would make sense that the people who are around us a lot can see things that maybe we can't see. So it just doesn't seem very wise to dismiss their opinion or their perspective just because they're our children or just because they're young.
Yeah.
They may actually be seeing stuff that we are blind to. So offering and engaging a conversation.
Yeah. Are you suggesting I have to watch some of these teenage TV shows that I can't bear to?
Well, what if it's both?
Okay,
you go back and forth.
Good. I like it. The both end. Yeah.
Well, and I do think it is about finding a system. And again, we know that many of the people who are listening, their children may be out of the home.
Yes.
And they're believing all their parenting has ended. And what I would say is actually that's not true. It may have morphed into a different form, but that parenting role continues. And, you've alluded to this, but what's true is a lot of times what we begin to become aware of, especially for those of us who struggle with addiction, is how our children were impacted by the addiction.
Yeah.
And that is no minor thing. And so the repair for something like that is going to be a significant effort because the injury was great. And so allowing ourselves to begin the conversation, I know for a lot of men, they're almost afraid to begin the conversation of how do you suppose you were impacted by my addiction, because they aren't quite ready to hear the answer. But to be open to begin that conversation, I think can be very helpful. What we also know is in a family system, there may be one parent who wants to talk about it and one parent who doesn't, and that can create its own kind of chaos. Yeah. Where as parents, we're trying to discern, how do we have these conversations with our children?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have any ideas for that?
When does that book come out?
Yeah. Well, we have done podcasts on talking to the children before, but I do think it needs to be in some agreement, and it's seen more as a conversation than just a talk.
Exactly.
So even if
if
it's just an initial acknowledgement that we're dealing with something as a couple, that could be the beginning of it. Or dad went away to this workshop and these are some of the things that he's learning about himself. Or, mom can own, you probably have experienced me as being really sad. Well, this is one of the things that's going on. It doesn't have to be all these details, but it can begin an acknowledgement in some way that there is this thing that we know has impacted the family. We're just starting to learn about it. And especially with the vision of we are wanting repair down the line, knowing this is going to take some time too.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And I think, yes, having that understanding that long-term ruptures means long-term repair, right?
Right.
It might take some time. It might take many, many conversations. One of the things I often talk to parents about is when there has been, let's say, a trauma in the family, or there has been the hard thing. If we can imagine like a scale, like a balance, right? On one end, on one side of that balance is a bowling ball of hurt. And what we need to do to create long-term repair is, on the other side of that balance, putting tissues of repair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take a lot of tissues,
Mm-hmm.
right? However, and those tissues are these micro moments of connection and seeing and creating space and attunement and organizing feelings and being big containers of children's feelings. And it's these micro moments that can happen thousands of times during the course of a day or a week. And then slowly, right, this is the thing that becomes the new
Right.
culture of the family. It's not that the bowling ball of trauma or addiction is what everybody is kind of rotating around.
Right.
Right? It's this new culture of how we are with one another. And,
Yeah.
and in our
And using that imagery, the bowling ball doesn't go away.
Right.
I mean, the addiction can go away. There is sobriety. There can be recovery and transformation. But the reality of the story, the pain, the hurt, I can't get back those years that I was absent for my children because of the workaholism. And I can bring repair so that the workaholism can be acknowledged, and yet our family doesn't continue to be defined by that addiction.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we're looking for is allowing the pain and the trauma that the family system has experienced to no longer define it, but to be integrated into it.
Yes.
And I do think that for many parents, they grew up in a home where parents didn't talk about things. You know, they knew there were family secrets, that even they knew that a parent was struggling with addiction and it was never talked about. And so it does feel very new. It's literally, you're learning a brand new language. You're learning a brand new dance step, and it's going to be awkward. Maybe sometimes you share too much information or not enough information. Maybe you're too quick to share or too slow to share. But even in those micro injuries, there can be those repairs as you're looking towards the greater vision of intimacy and connection in the family system.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that.
One other thing that I would say is, as we're learning repair, there's going to be skills that we have to learn. And one of the things I see pretty consistently is a lot of parents, once they start recovery, eventually they start reading parenting books.
Mm-hmm.
They want to learn more about how doing this differently. And then they begin to use resources. They take this issue to their therapist. They take this issue to their communities, because we do need support and understanding and community as we're trying to figure out how to do it differently. That old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community in order to learn how to parent in this new way. So finding those resources, using your community so that you can show up differently for your children, no matter what age they might be.
Yeah. One of my greatest resources are two girlfriends, and we hop on the Marco Polo app 3 or 4 times a day. And even if it's for 30 seconds, we're just getting on there and saying, how are you guys dealing with such and such? And being able to hear other perspectives, and to know that what other families might do may not work for my family, but at least I'm connecting and hearing about and sharing what are other folks doing out there,
Right.
so that I'm not isolated, I'm not alone.
And it starts with the vulnerability to say, it's not always going well.
Oh, yes.
You know, again, I've talked about one of the things that can create chaos in a family system is that image management piece.
Yeah.
And again, I make references to all the men that have been to the workshop, but one of the big family rules, especially for men who grew up in Christian homes, was don't do anything to violate the family image. The image was more important than reality. So how we presented ourselves, what people saw. And so for some people, just being honest about some of the difficulty and pain and the chaos in their family is a huge step, because they're no longer being held hostage by an old family rule.
Oh, I love that language. Yeah.
We have an old family rule here at Faithful and True Podcast, and that's finish on time.
Yes,
so the
absolutely.
recording doesn't get cut off. Alexis, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us again. You're a wonderful guest on this podcast. We enjoy having you each and every time. Greg, you're amazing. You just turn the on switch and he goes. Yeah. It's all brilliant. Thanks for
Thank
leading
you.
us again today. Thank you for watching us and for being loyal listeners and viewers of the Faithful and True podcast. We hope that you have been motivated and benefited from today's program. We'd like to thank both Alexis and Greg for their participation. And we hope that you get the opportunity to visit our website, which is faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find lots of resources available to you, as well as many, many podcasts like this that you may benefit from, as well as all the information and online registration capabilities about our 3-day intensive workshops. Every month we do the Men's Journey Workshop. We 3 times a year we do the Women's Journey Workshop, and then we have 2 different formats, so the Couples Journey Workshop. And all that information is on our website for you. Please check it out, and hopefully you can visit us if you're searching for counseling. Those are also things that we offer here at Faithful and True. So in the meantime, thanks for joining us today, and we hope that this coming week for you will be a week filled with many blessings and with great vision.